Well, welcome to this, our first CTN debate. The motion, should UCD SU be affiliated with the USI? Joining me here from the UCD Usi Affiliation Campus, Chris Lee, and then for UCD for USI is Sean Glennon. Guys, I'm just going to start away with the first question. How does membership of the USI actually benefit the average UCD student?
Thanks very much, James. The most important thing to remember about a union, any union, including a students' union, is that their function is to bring their members together in order to represent them better. Now, UCD Students' Union does that by uniting all students on campus in UCD, so they can negotiate with the college with a stronger voice, with a voice of all the students behind them. Now, the way USI benefits the average UCD student is that brings it to a national level that unites us from students all around the country, from Letterkenny to Cork, from Galway to Maynooth, all students united under the USI banner. This gives us a seat at the Higher Education Authority. It means when we go out negotiating with the government, when we go out protesting, we do that with the full strength of the entire students' movement behind us. Besides that, there are a number of services USI provides to students' unions across the country. This week we're in Shag Week, sexual health awareness, and what you have there is condoms provided by USI. They're Durex. I know in DCU, which is an unaffiliated college, they get some little brand. So that's always great. And also you're talking about officer training for sabbatical officers.
Well, I think what Sean said there was true in an idealistic sense, but not really true. Like, it doesn't unite us all. I think it's fair to say that I don't feel any closer to a student from UCC than I would if USI didn't exist. And as he pointed out, there are non-affiliated universities. There's DCU, there's UL, there's CIT, and there's countless more big non-affiliated universities. And the services they provide are often overpriced and sometimes not the best. One of the big things that USI provides us is pink training. But the question is, do you want something as important as LGBT training run by an amateur student 1 year out of college? As an alternative, we would suggest that these things could be provided by NGOs and different organisations. Listen, on the ground, most UCD students don't get a say in USI. There's 24,000 students in this college. 27 get to vote for the president. They are handpicked by our students' union when they go to Congress. And so for those reasons, I don't think the average student here in UCD has received any huge benefit from USI. Sean pointed towards Shag Week, but honestly, a huge shipment of free condoms. We already have huge shipments of free condoms in our SU office every day of the week. It's nothing more than a tokenistic gesture. It actually doesn't provide a whole lot more than these things. And so, honestly, I don't think UCD students have benefited any great way from USI, and I don't think there's any feeling of unity between the students in Ireland because of USI. I think it creates more division than anything else.
I see. Okay, this is a statement from the University Observer editorial, just from about, I think, 2 weeks ago. Students are demanding services, not ideas. An essential group relying entirely on the money regional unions give to them has absolutely no ability to provide anything practical. During these debates on their values, the USI focuses primarily on what they provide to regional college unions such as rep training and pink day training, but for €120,000 the SU could easily do this themselves.
I think one of the things that needs to be said straight away about pink training and the rep training provided here in UCSU is that we pay for it on top of our affiliation fee. It doesn't even come into 120 grand. We pay for each delegate who goes to pink training. We pay for each one of our sabbats who goes to sabbatical training. The type of services on campus that we're talking about, the types of services we're losing, are things like the copy print bureau. That was costing us about 40 grand a year. We couldn't afford it anymore. We fired 2 staff who had worked in UCD upwards of 25 years. We're talking about the bar. The bar at the moment costs UCDSU €3,500 rent per night that they want to open. Because of that, we've been limited to 5 nights this semester for us having a bar. Like, these are the sort of frontline services students are losing. These are the sort of frontline services students care about. And these are things that USI can never provide us and have never tried to provide us. And they weren't there campaigning and they didn't offer us any sort of debt relief or membership fees relief. And so, yeah, it is the services that we're talking about here that we're going to lose. And it's something well worth fighting for. USI could be reformed and slimmed down massively to not provide anything but lobbying, to be a union, to be three people who are going to go and campaign for our rights in the Dáil. And if you cut everything else, it won't cost very much. You know, we could cut the costs of the entire organisation down to around what our affiliation fee is alone.
Okay.
The point you made there on the services that are being lost on campus in UCD are down to gross negligence and corruption by members of UCD Students' Union. So first of all, I find it ludicrous that you think the solution to this is, loading all the authority back into UCD Students' Union. Another thing is you have situations like in IT Talis Students' Union. Recently, a few months back, there was huge controversy when one of their sabbatical officers made some very sexist, made some very sexist, misogynistic comments. Now, these are examples of where USI can step in and be a place where students can go when female students within IT Tala felt, I can't go to my students' union with this. My students' union are discriminating towards me. So they took it to USI, they took this issue to USI, and the sabbatical officers were involved were disciplined. And that's how it works.
What you said there, firstly, about UCD students in the union being corrupt was nothing short of defamation. It's very well publicised that the financial mismanagement in the union was by an employee of the university and not by any members of the students' union, and I would be careful to continue on that vein. But what you said about IT Tala highlights an issue here, in that while it's great that IT Tala had some avenue for students to protect themselves against these comments from the president, what about disaffiliated universities? Why isn't there a mechanism for disaffiliated universities to have these complaints sorted out? Like, surely IT Tala students should have complained to their university and not to USI if they had a problem with their representative. They should have complained to the government and not USI if they had a problem with their representatives. I don't think those sort of jobs are the things that we should leave up to the whims of affiliation or not. If that had happened in DCU, it's not a young girl's fault that her university isn't affiliated. So why does she have no avenue for protecting herself? And that's just one of the things that I think USI is getting used for that it shouldn't be used for. There should be a different avenue for.
That's why there's movements within DCU and CIT to currently re-affiliate, because students are realising within DCU SU, for example, the ENDS budget is bigger than the education budget.
Within our SU, the ENDS budget is...
I might just let Sean just finish that point, Chris, if that's okay.
These are students in unaffiliated colleges who realise what they're missing out from not being part of USI, and therefore they know which way the wind's blowing. We've just seen Trinity reject disaffiliation. Are we going to be out there standing by ourselves, soon to be the only disaffiliated college? Who's going to listen to us then?
I mean, for every example you gave, we can give the counter example. Like Maynooth are currently affiliated; they're going to the polls at the same time. Just because DCU student union supported a motion to have a referendum doesn't mean there's a movement to disaffiliate. I think you're kind of taking that to a different level. But other than that, I feel that we're not going to be standing alone. Like, there's only 28 affiliated member organisations. Only half the students in this country are affiliated. So I don't think it's a particular problem. And not only that, we have another referendum in 4 years. All right. So even worst case scenario, we leave and we feel we're out there on our own. We're back in 4 years. We constitutionally have to be back in 4 years. And so under your worst case scenario, we get a €480,000 loan that we don't have to pay back because we save 4 years worth of affiliation fees and we're back into USI in 4 years. Nothing lost.
I'm just going to let Sean just give a quick bit of rebuttal, and then we're going to move on to question 3.
Well, I'm sorry. I think any amount of time where UCD students aren't represented at a national level is too long. So 4 years or not, it's too much.
This one is just for Chris. Do you feel like the USI are genuinely interested in student welfare, or are they more interested in making sure that their friends from the various student unions around Ireland can stay in some kind of office? Are we just feeding the cliques?
I'm not going to accuse USI officers of not being interested in student welfare. Obviously they are. These are people who care. These are people who probably have promising careers that they're taking a year out of to go into USI. But they are so burdened by bureaucracy and politics and infighting in USI that they are forced to feed the clique. So, like, for instance, a USI officer running for president couldn't say, let's get rid of the Western region and the Southern region officers because they're too expensive, because they would lose the vote of those institutions, of the Western and Southern colleges and of the officers who are running, and that's something they just can't do. And it's become so burdened by this bureaucracy that it won't really ever be successful. And you've got to ask what USI were doing at key times in our history. Like, fees rose from £90 to €1,000 between 1997 and 2007. 10-year period of the boom, fees increased by €90 a year, which is like, that's actually comparable to the rise we're seeing at the moment when we're in this huge depression. So I wouldn't accuse them of being disinterested in welfare. I would say they are so burdened by bureaucracy, so burdened by this political infighting that they're not effectively able to fight for welfare. And Sean, I'd like to see how you respond to that, to be honest.
Yes, Sean, are we feeding the clique?
Well, I think what's happened, especially what you mentioned there about being burdened with bureaucracy and the politics of USI, the problem is the leadership of USI. The leadership at the moment revolves around a very conservative-dominated president and a majority of his exec. That's why they don't have a commitment currently to free education, despite the fact that's what their national mandate dictates them to do. That's where we as a progressive movement have to push forward. We have to make sure that we're represented at every level of student politics, including at a national level, so we can go into government with our demands that education is a right, not a privilege, and that every student across the country is entitled to that. The way you're mentioning that no officer can get up and argue reform, we have seen reform. We've seen the abolition of the Eastern Area officer, for example, because the workload wasn't there. And I know a previous incumbent in that role who completely agrees with that, whereas the Southern and Western officers do actually currently perform a function. So if there's any click there, it's because of the political culture within USI, and that's something that needs to be changed. You wouldn't get rid of the Dáil or the government because you don't like the political attitudes there. Why get rid of USI?
Okay, Sean. Sorry, Chris. Do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up a few things there. The first was the Eastern Region Officer, and you gave it as an example of reform. There's two things I want to say about the Eastern Region Officer. The first is that the Eastern Region Officer is, of course, the stepping stone John Logue used into USI back in 2010. When he lost the UCD education election, and it shows how that position was abused. But secondly, the only reason that position was reformed was because last year Suzanne Tuddy, the Eastern Region Officer, took the decision herself to resign early in a demonstration that the position was pointless. She was the one who took the pay cut. She was the one who made that sacrifice, and it shouldn't be a personal burden on her to fix that. Now, the second thing you said, and I want to talk about, is this idea that they have a mandate for free fees. Now, it's not a fees debate, and I don't want to get into the fees debate with you, but that mandate came from the referendum held last year. And that referendum was used to get all of the member organisations to create the mandate that their delegates would vote by in Special Congress. If all of the delegates in Special Congress had voted the way their students had voted, the mandate wouldn't be for free fees, it'd be for a student contribution. But the delegates broke their mandates. So all of the students in Ireland voted in this referendum, and they voted to try and change something. They voted with actual intention. They voted as informed voters, and their delegates completely ignored their votes. The people handpicked to go to Congress decided that they were going to go for something completely different. Now, as a student, that made me angry. As a student, that should make everyone who hears about it angry. And it's amazing that USI didn't get in more trouble for it, because mandate breaking is no less than political corruption, and Special Congress last year demonstrates that that political corruption is completely rife within USI.
Well, I think it's very interesting that earlier on in the debate you were giving out about delegates being instructed to vote, and then when they're actually showing some initiative and acting on their conscience and breaking mandate, such as, people have done it before, breaking mandate for just causes. One example is Ivana Bacik, she was president of Trinity Students' Union, broke her mandate because of an issue she believed in. She took the cost there, she had to resign. That's a show of integrity within the students' movement, and obviously we should be reforming so that it reflects the democratic will of the students. But you can't come along and give out about delegates being whipped on one hand and then give out when they break their mandate.
Sean, there's two different types of mandate here. A mandate that comes from your Students' Union Council doesn't have much democratic legitimacy. Breaking it is bad, but it's not that bad. They're the mandates I was annoyed about earlier. But that Special Congress mandate, it didn't come from an anonymous council of hacks. That Special Congress mandate earlier came directly from their students in the most democratic way possible, which was an online election that everyone had access to, that we promoted for a solid 9 days to try to get people to vote in. And disrespecting that democratic mandate is absolutely inexcusable at any level. That is a disrespect to democracy. And if you don't agree with that statement, I would worry for your definition of the word democracy.
And I also think that coming along and saying that students of UCD came along and they voted in referendum for a contribution charge, and that's not being reflected by the national USI organisation. I'm just really curious to know. Are the odds of getting the government to keep the contribution fee at €2,000 while the rest of the country campaigns for free fees? It doesn't seem feasible that we go off on our own way and we go onto the streets with all of 500 students that we can turn out, when the rest of the students across the country, as part of USI, are campaigning on a collective mandate.
It's a complete misrepresentation of what I said. The Students' Union in UCD voted for a student contribution, so the Students' Unions in Trinity, and in fact the majority of the Students' Unions, based on their delegate representation, voted for student contribution. So when I said we voted for student contribution, what I actually meant was the majority voted for student contribution, and that's not what's been reflected. It's not a debate about fees. I'm not here to debate about what USI's attitude is at the moment.
I'm just really interested in your theory that you think
we can go it alone.
That you think the UCD students are better able to get their views listened to by the government at a demonstration of all of 500 people than the entire national students movement that can turn out between 20 and 30,000 people on the streets.
It's not about whether or not we're better able to. Like, USI obviously aren't able to get our views listened to.
We need to be better able.
Excuse me, give me a second. Give me a second to finish this, right? But USI clearly aren't able at the moment to get our views listened to. They've been dramatically unsuccessful that 500 students from UCD are going out. I would say that the apathy in UCD comes from the fact that they're getting told to campaign for this faceless organisation, USI. You want to combat apathy, bring everything back to a more local level. It's local politics and a local union that will help fight apathy and help fix the problems of small turnout of protests.
Maybe the apathy stems from UCD students being told to go down to Dunleary and march outside the empty office of the Minister for Foreign Affairs when their education officer in UCDSU had rejected a meeting with Rory Quinn.
Absolutely.
Rejected a meeting with the Minister for Education. And these are the people you want to hand the representation of UCD students' issues to, who, when offered a meeting with the Minister for Education, says, no, sorry, on the fees issue, we think we're going to go to the Foreign Affairs Minister instead, and we're going to protest outside his constituency offices. Because that's how...
Again, you're misrepresenting two things. Firstly, Shane Comer wasn't offered a meeting with Rory Quinn. He was offered a meeting with one of Rory Quinn's aides. Secondly, it wasn't our plan to march on Gilmore's office. USI gave us the target and the date. Right? So it was USI who decided that we were going to march against the Taoiseach, a man who could not possibly have backtracked on his position of fees. It was USI who sent us on this hopeless mission. And it was USI who squarely placed the blame on our students' union when the mission failed. And if that's not a reason to disaffiliate, I don't know what is.
Okay, guys, I think we're going to leave it there. I'm just going to give you a quick final word. We're going to start off with Sean.
Well, say finally to the students of UCD, is if they want their voices heard on a national level, if they want to take advantage of the wide range of services that USI provides for them, then vote yes to affiliation.
USI has been ineffective for a long time. There's no indication that it's ever going to change. We need that money now more than we ever had before. So I say let's take the money and let's tell USI not a penny more. Come back to us in 4 years as a reformed union and we'll rejoin. But until then, we need control of our finances.
Thanks again to both candidates, Sean Glennon from UCD for USI and Chris Lee from the UCD Disaffiliation Campaign.